The transport ship Galactic Unity shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of emergency deceleration. Commander Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small porthole, watching the swirling storms of Kepler 442b grow larger through the thick atmosphere. The planet looked hostile even from orbit, with its purple-tinged clouds and violent electromagnetic storms crackling across the surface. "Another glorious assignment," she muttered, adjusting the worn straps of her gear pack. The other passengers in the transport bay gave her sideways glances, their alien features twisted in what she had learned to recognize as disdain. 3 Zephyrian soldiers sat opposite her, their blue-scaled skin gleaming under the harsh lights, their elongated heads turned toward her occasionally, followed by chittering sounds that passed for laughter among their species. The Corvani delegate, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in what Sarah knew was disapproval. Even the usually peaceful Altarians, with their flowing tentacle appendages, seemed to regard her with suspicion. She was the only human on the transport, and clearly unwelcome. "Attention passengers," the ship's automated voice announced in the universal trade language. "Prepare for atmospheric entry to mining colony Theta 7. Weather conditions are severe. All personnel report to designated stations immediately upon landing." Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Her standard-issue pulse rifle felt light compared to the weapons she was used to carrying during her Navy SEAL days back on Earth. The environmental suit was bulky and unfamiliar, designed for a dozen different alien physiologies rather than optimized for human use. Everything about this assignment screamed afterthought, which was exactly what she was to the Galactic Mining Consortium. The Zephyrian squad leader, whose name translated roughly to Stormclaw, leaned forward with a predatory grin. His teeth were sharp and numerous, evolved for tearing through the tough vegetation of his homeworld. "Human," he hissed in accented galactic standard. "You sure you ready for this?" "Theta 7, not place for weak species." Sarah met his gaze steadily. She had dealt with bullies before, both in the military and in the corporate security jobs she had taken since leaving Earth. The Zephyrians were known for their aggression and pack mentality, but they were also predictable. "I've handled worse," she replied simply. Stormclaw's companions chittered again. One of them, scarred across his snout from some old battle, spoke up. "Worse? Human homeworld is garden paradise compared to real combat zones. You probably never even seen blood." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. She had seen more blood than most beings in this galaxy would in several lifetimes. 3 tours in Earth's most dangerous regions, countless operations that remained classified, and more close calls than she cared to remember. But here, among these supposed warriors who had never faced anything more dangerous than mining equipment malfunctions, she was considered weak simply because she was human. The transport lurched violently as it hit the upper atmosphere, throwing everyone against their restraints. Warning lights flashed red as the ship's stabilizers struggled against the planet's notorious wind shears. Through the porthole, Sarah could see lightning arcing between massive cloud formations, each bolt containing enough energy to power a small city. "Rough ride," commented the Corvani, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. "Perhaps the human should reconsider this assignment. Mining colonies can be quite dangerous for those unaccustomed to hardship." Sarah almost smiled. If they only knew about the extraction missions she had run, pulling wounded soldiers out of hostile territory while under heavy fire. If they knew about the underwater operations where a single mistake meant drowning and freezing water miles from any help. If they knew about the times she had carried wounded teammates for kilometers through desert terrain while enemy forces closed in from all sides. But they didn't know. And she wasn't about to tell them. Earth was still considered a backwater planet by most of the galaxy, its inhabitants viewed as soft and inexperienced. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and they were still trying to prove themselves worthy of respect. The transport broke through the cloud layer, revealing the mining colony below. Theta 7 was a collection of prefabricated structures, clustered around massive excavation sites, connected by covered walkways that looked fragile against the planet's harsh environment. Dust storms swept across the surface, carrying particles that could strip paint from metal in minutes. "Colony operations to Transport 779, crackled a voice over the comm system. "We have you on approach. Be advised, We're experiencing Class 5 atmospheric disturbance. Recommend immediate shelter upon landing. The pilot's response was tense. Copy that, Theta 7. Beginning final approach now. As the ship descended toward the landing pad, Sarah could see figures moving between the buildings below. The colony housed over 300 beings from a dozen different species, all working together to extract rare minerals from the planet's crust. It should have been a model of galactic cooperation, but she knew from her briefing files that tensions ran high in such isolated conditions. The landing was rougher than usual, with the ship bouncing twice before the magnetic clamps engaged. Emergency foam sprayed across the landing struts as the ship settled, a precaution against the corrosive atmosphere. The passenger bay began pressurizing to match the colony's artificial environment. Welcome to paradise, Stormclaw announced with obvious sarcasm. Hope human can keep up. As the airlock cycled open, a wave of heated air rushed in, carrying with it the metallic tang of processed ore and the ozone smell of constant electrical storms. The colony's greeting committee was waiting outside, a mix of species in environmental gear, their faces hidden behind protective visors. The colony administrator was a Centaurian, her forearms moving in the gesture patterns that served as her species' primary form of communication. A translation device on her belt converted her movements into speech. Welcome to Theta 7. I am Administrator Vex Ka. You will be assigned quarters and duties according to your specialization. The Zephyrian squad moved forward as a unit, their confidence evident in every step. The other passengers followed, chattering among themselves about their assignments and accommodations. Sarah brought up the rear, her gear pack heavy on her shoulders. Vex K's compound eyes fixed on her as she approached. You must be Security Specialist Chen. We have been expecting you. Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied, offering a crisp nod that was wasted on a being who communicated primarily through arm movements. Your quarters are in Section C. Level 3. Report to Security Chief Tharn tomorrow at 0800 for orientation. Vex K's tone was neutral, but Sarah caught the subtle dismissal. She was clearly not considered important enough for a proper briefing. The walk to her quarters took them through the main corridor of the colony, a wide tunnel lined with shops, recreational facilities, and administrative offices. The air recycling systems hummed constantly, working to filter out the toxic particles that somehow found their way through even the best seals. Sarah's room was small and Spartan, barely large enough for a bed, desk, and storage locker. A single window looked out onto the mining operations, where massive machines carved into the planet's surface under protective energy shields. The view was both impressive and depressing. She unpacked her few belongings, placing a small photo of her old SEAL team on the desk. The faces staring back at her were younger, more optimistic versions of herself and her teammates. Most of them were still serving on Earth, protecting humanity's interests in an increasingly complex galaxy. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on her personal communicator. The text was brief and unsigned. Human Security Officer, report to Recreation Level 7 for integration exercises. Participation mandatory. Sarah frowned. Integration exercises weren't mentioned in her assignment briefing, and Recreation Level 7 was listed as an off-limits area in the colony layout. Something about this felt wrong, but she was new here and still learning the local protocols. She changed into her off-duty uniform and made her way to Level 7. The recreation area was larger than she expected, with high ceilings and multiple activity zones. Most of the space was taken up by a large gymnasium equipped for various alien physiologies, but there were also quieter areas for meditation and social interaction. The Zephyrian squad was waiting for her, along with several other security personnel from different species. They had formed a loose circle in the center of the gymnasium, their body language suggesting barely contained aggression. Ah, human arrives, Stormclaw announced loudly. Time for proper introduction to colony security protocols. Sarah remained calm, but every instinct honed by years of combat training was suddenly alert. The setup felt like an ambush, and the way the other personnel were positioned confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't an official exercise. What kind of protocols? She asked, keeping her voice level. The scarred Zephyrian stepped forward, his claws extending slightly from his fingertips. Combat Readiness Assessment. Colony security must work as unit. Weak links put everyone at risk. R. Combat. To Endivord. Around the circle, the other security personnel nodded agreement. Sarah recognized the pack mentality at work. They had decided she was the weak link, and now they were going to prove it to themselves and anyone else who might be watching. I understand your concern, Sarah said carefully. But I'd prefer to go through official channels for any assessment. Stormclaw's laugh was harsh and grating. No official channels here, human. Only survival. You prove yourself worthy of respect, or you prove yourself weak. Simple. The circle began to close, and Sarah realized she was in serious trouble. These weren't just bullies trying to haze the new arrival. They were genuinely convinced that human beings were inferior and potentially dangerous to work with. In their minds, they were protecting the colony by exposing her weakness. What they didn't understand was that they were about to discover exactly why human beings had survived and thrived on one of the galaxy's most dangerous planets. The first attack came from her left side. A Corvani security officer whose insectoid reflexes should have made him faster than any human. Should have been the key phrase. Sarah's training kicked in automatically, muscle memory from countless hours of combat practice taking over her conscious mind. She sidestepped the clumsy charge and used the attacker's momentum against him, sending him sprawling across the gymnasium floor with a technique that would have been familiar to any martial arts student on Earth. The Corvani hit the ground hard, his compound eyes wide with surprise. Lucky move, Stormclaw snarled, but his confidence seemed slightly shaken. The next attack was more coordinated, with two opponents coming at her from different angles. Sarah dropped low and swept the legs out from under the first attacker, an Altarian whose tentacles were strong but slow. As he fell, she rolled forward and came up behind the second attacker, a reptilian Draconin whose scales were supposed to provide natural armor. Her elbow strike found the nerve cluster at the base of his skull, a weak point that was standard anatomy across dozens of species. The Draconin collapsed immediately. Stunned, but not seriously injured, the gymnasium fell silent except for the labored breathing of the fallen attackers. The remaining security personnel stared at Sarah in shock, their understanding of human capabilities suddenly shattered. Impossible, whispered one of them. Humans are supposed to be weak. Sarah straightened her uniform and looked around the circle calmly. We're supposed to be a lot of things, she said. Most of them are wrong. Stormclaw stepped forward, his pack instincts overriding his confusion. If the human was stronger than expected, that just meant the pack had to be stronger still. Clever tricks, he growled. But tricks not enough against real warrior. This time, Sarah didn't wait for the attack to come to her. Sarah moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of violence. Stormclaw was bigger, stronger, and armed with natural weapons that could tear through standard body armor. But he had never fought a human before, and his assumptions about her capabilities were about to cost him dearly. The Zephyrian lunged forward with his claws extended, relying on his species' traditional fighting style of overwhelming aggression. Sarah stepped aside at the last possible moment, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to flip him over her shoulder. The technique was basic judo, taught to every SEAL recruit, but executed with the precision of someone who had used it in real combat situations. Stormclaw hit the floor with a bone-jarring impact, his scales scraping against the metal decking. Before he could recover, Sarah had his arm twisted behind his back in a submission hold that would have impressed her old instructors. The pressure she applied was precise enough to cause pain without permanent damage. Yield, she said quietly. Stormclaw struggled against the hold for a moment, then went still as he realized he was completely helpless. Around them, the other security personnel watched in stunned silence. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Sarah released him and stepped back, offering her hand to help him up. It was a gesture of respect that confused the Zephyrian even more than his defeat. In his culture, the victor dominated the defeated. Mercy was seen as weakness. I don't understand, he said, ignoring her offered hand and climbing to his feet on his own. Humans are supposed to be fragile. Your homeworld is garden paradise. No real predators. No environmental hazards worthy of mention. Sarah almost laughed. Earth's reputation in the galactic community was based on carefully edited tourism videos and diplomatic presentations that emphasized humanity's peaceful achievements. No one mentioned the fact that humans had evolved on a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife was actively trying to kill them. Earth might look peaceful from orbit, she said, but it's one of the most dangerous worlds in known space. We just learned to adapt. A new voice cut through the conversation before Stormclaw could respond. What exactly is happening here? Security Chief Tharn stood in the gymnasium entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway. The Ursidae was nearly 3 meters tall, with thick fur and claws that made the Zephyrians look harmless by comparison. His species was known for their strength and their absolutely unforgiving approach to discipline. The security personnel scrambled to attention, but Tharn's small, intelligent eyes were fixed on Sarah. She remained at ease, neither challenging his authority nor showing fear of his imposing presence. Integration exercise. Sir, Stormclaw said quickly. Testing new personnel for combat readiness. Tharn's growl was deep enough to vibrate through the floor. Integration exercises are conducted under supervision, with proper safety protocols, and only after official authorization. His gaze swept over the fallen security officers. This appears to be an unauthorized hazing incident. Sarah stepped forward. Sir, I was invited to participate in what I was told were mandatory integration exercises. When I arrived, I found myself in what appeared to be a hostile situation. I defended myself using minimum necessary force. The security chief studied her for a long moment. Ursidae were known for their ability to read other beings' emotional states through subtle cues, and Sarah kept her expression neutral while projecting calm confidence. You took down 4 trained security personnel without weapons or protective gear, Tharn observed. Yes, sir. And you claim this was minimum necessary force? Sarah nodded. I could have ended the confrontation more quickly, but I preferred not to cause permanent injuries. Stormclaw bristled at the implication that she had been holding back, but a warning glance from Tharn kept him silent. Report to my office at 0600 tomorrow, Tharn told Sarah. We need to discuss your background in more detail. He turned to address the other security personnel. Anyone involved in unauthorized combat exercises will spend the next week on waste reclamation duty. Clear this area immediately. As the others filed out, nursing their wounds and their damaged pride, Tharn remained behind. Walk with me, he told Sarah. They left the gymnasium and took a lift to the upper levels of the colony. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Sarah could see the constant storm activity that made surface operations so challenging. Lightning arced between the mining platforms, creating a spectacular but deadly light show. 15 years I've been running security for mining operations, Tharn said as they walked. I've seen representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Most of them arrive with detailed files, service records, and credentials that tell me exactly what to expect. He stopped at an observation deck, overlooking the main mining pit. Your file says, Security Specialist, Earth Forces, Honorable Discharge. Sarah watched a massive extraction crawler move through the pit below, its energy shields sparking as debris struck them. Sometimes the most important information is classified. Classified by whom? Earth Space Command. Our military records aren't fully integrated with galactic databases yet. Security concerns. It was true, as far as it went. Humanity was still new enough to the galactic community that many of their military capabilities remained unknown to potential allies and enemies alike. The strategic advantage of being underestimated was too valuable to give up lightly. Tharn's rumbling laugh surprised her. Security concerns? Yes, I imagine there would be. He turned to face her directly. The way you moved in there, the techniques you used, the precision of your strikes, that wasn't standard security training. Sarah met his gaze steadily. What do you think it was? Special operations, elite military unit. The kind of training that takes years to develop and combat experience to perfect. His expression grew serious. The question is, what is someone with your background doing working security for a mining operation on the edge of civilized space? It was a fair question, and one that Sarah had been asking herself since accepting this assignment. The official answer was that she needed work, and the Galactic Mining Consortium paid well for experienced security personnel. The real answer was more complicated. Sometimes soldiers need a break from soldiering, she said finally. Tharn nodded slowly. I understand, but you should know that Theta 7 isn't as peaceful as it appears on the operational reports. We've had increasing problems with equipment sabotage, unauthorized access to restricted areas, and what might be organized resistance to the mining operation. Sarah's interest sharpened. Resistance from whom? Unknown. The planet was supposed to be uninhabited when we established the colony, but our surveys might have been incomplete. Someone or something has been interfering with our operations for the past 6 months. They were interrupted by an emergency alarm that echoed through the colony's corridors. Red warning lights began flashing, and the automated announcement system activated. All personnel report to emergency stations. Mining Platform 7 is experiencing catastrophic system failure. Evacuation teams to emergency transport bay immediately. Through the observation deck windows, they could see Platform 7 in the distance, its normally bright work lights flickering erratically. Smoke was beginning to pour from several locations on the massive structure. How many personnel on that platform? Sarah asked. 43, Tharn replied grimly. And with these weather conditions, normal evacuation protocols won't work. The storm outside had intensified, with wind speeds that would make shuttle operations impossible. The emergency transport bay would be useless if they couldn't get ships airborne. What about ground-based evacuation? The platform is surrounded by unstable terrain and acid pools. The only safe approach is by air. Sarah studied the situation through the window. The platform was listing to one side, suggesting structural damage to its support systems. If it collapsed into the mining pit, everyone aboard would be lost. I have an idea, she said. But I'll need authorization to access restricted equipment. Tharn looked at her sharply. What kind of equipment? Military surplus gear that might not be on your standard inventory lists. The security chief hesitated for only a moment. Whatever you need. Lives are more important than regulations. Sarah was already moving toward the lift. I'll need Stormclaw and his team, plus any other security personnel with combat training. And I'll need them to follow orders without question, even if those orders seem crazy. Done. What else? Access to the colony's industrial fabrication unit, a detailed map of the underground tunnel system, and someone who knows the local terrain better than anyone else. As the lift descended toward the equipment levels, Sarah's mind was already working through the tactical possibilities. This wasn't going to be a standard rescue operation. The conditions were too hostile, the timeline too short, and the available resources too limited for conventional methods. But conventional methods were for people who hadn't spent years extracting personnel from impossible situations under hostile fire. Sarah had done this before, in places that made Kepler 442b look like a vacation resort. The question was whether her new colleagues could adapt quickly enough to the kind of operation she had in mind. The equipment level was a maze of storage bays and maintenance workshops, filled with the tools and machinery needed to keep a mining colony operational. Sarah moved through it with purpose, ignoring the standard emergency gear and heading for a restricted access bay that most colony personnel never saw. Her security clearance, enhanced by Tharn's authorization, got her through the locked doors and past the automated security systems. Inside, she found exactly what she was looking for. Military-grade equipment that Earth Space Command had quietly stationed at strategic locations throughout human-occupied space. The powered armor suit was designed for hostile environment operations, with enhanced strength augmentation and life support systems that could function in almost any atmospheric conditions. The weapons package included experimental human technology that most galactic species had never encountered. But it wasn't the equipment that would make the difference. It was the training and experience that allowed her to use it effectively. Stormclaw and his team arrived as she was running through the armor's system checks. Their earlier hostility had been replaced by professional curiosity and a grudging respect for her abilities. "What do you need us to do?" Stormclaw asked without preamble. Sarah activated the holographic display table and called up the colony schematics. "Platform 7 is going to collapse within the next 30 minutes, she said, highlighting the structural damage reports. Standard evacuation procedures won't work because of the storm. But there's another way. She traced a path through the underground tunnel system that connected the various mining operations. These maintenance tunnels run under the entire mining complex. There's an emergency access point here, approximately 200 meters from Platform 7's foundation supports. The Zephyrian studied the display. The terrain between the tunnel exit and the platform is completely unstable. One wrong step, and you fall into an acid pool. Not if you know what you're doing, Sarah replied. And not if you have the right equipment. She outlined her plan quickly and efficiently, drawing on tactical principles that her teammates recognized even if they had never seen them applied in this context. It was risky, requiring precise timing and absolute trust between team members, but it was their best chance of reaching the trapped personnel before the platform collapsed. "This is insane," one of the other security officers muttered. Stormclaw silenced him with a gesture. "Insane plans sometimes work when sane ones fail." He looked at Sarah with new respect. "What do you need from us? Follow my lead, stay in communication, and be ready to adapt when things go wrong." Sarah sealed her helmet and activated the armor's systems, because things always go wrong. The underground tunnels were a labyrinth of maintenance passages carved through solid rock, designed to provide access to the mining equipment during extreme weather conditions. Emergency lighting strips cast an eerie glow as Sarah led her improvised rescue team through the narrow corridors, her powered armor's sensors mapping their route in real time. Behind her, Stormclaw and his team moved with the fluid coordination of experienced fighters, their earlier doubts about human capabilities forgotten in the face of an immediate crisis. The Zephyrians had adapted quickly to her leadership style, recognizing the authority that came from genuine competence rather than mere rank. "Platform 7 status report," Sarah requested through her communication link. Tharn's voice crackled through the speakers. "Structural integrity down to 30% and falling. Estimated collapse in 18 minutes. The trapped personnel are gathered in the main control center, but that section is taking the most stress." Sarah increased her pace. The armor's enhanced strength, allowing her to move faster through the confined space than would normally be possible. The tunnel system extended for kilometers in every direction, connecting mining platforms, processing facilities, and storage depots in a network that few colony personnel fully understood. "Emergency access point, Alpha 7 coming up," she announced. "Remember the plan. We go in fast, establish a perimeter, and get those people out before the whole structure comes down." The access point was a reinforced airlock designed for emergency evacuation scenarios, though it had never been tested under these conditions. Sarah's armor interfaced directly with the control systems, overriding safety protocols that would normally prevent operation during severe weather. The outer door opened to reveal a hellscape of wind, driving rain, and lightning strikes that turned the landscape into something from a nightmare. The mining platform loomed ahead of them, a massive industrial structure that was visibly tilting as its foundation supports failed one by one. "Sweet ancestors," one of the Zephyrians muttered. "How are we supposed to cross that?" The terrain between their position and the platform was exactly as hostile as the geological surveys had indicated. Pools of industrial acid bubbled up from underground reservoirs, creating a maze of deadly obstacles. The rain had turned the rocky surface into a slippery nightmare, and the constant lightning made electronic navigation unreliable. But Sarah had crossed worse terrain under worse conditions. During her final operation as a SEAL, she had led an extraction team through a toxic swamp while under fire from 3 different enemy factions. This was dangerous, but it was manageable with the right approach. "Single file, maintain visual contact, and step exactly where I step," she ordered. "The armor's sensors can detect stable footing, but only if we move carefully." She led them into the storm, her enhanced vision cutting through the driving rain to identify the safest path. Behind her, the rescue team followed with the discipline of experienced soldiers, trusting her judgment even when it led them within meters of pools that could dissolve flesh in seconds. The platform's emergency beacon guided them through the worst of the terrain, its signal growing stronger as they approached the massive structure. Up close, the damage was even worse than the remote sensors had indicated. Entire sections of the platform's support framework had buckled, and stress fractures were spreading through the main structural beams. "Estimated time to collapse?" Sarah asked. 7 minutes, came Tharn's grim reply. "Maybe less if the storm gets any worse." Sarah activated her armor's external speakers and called out to the platform. "Platform 7. This is Emergency Rescue Team Alpha. We are approaching your location from the southeast. Prepare for immediate evacuation." A response came quickly, the voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Emergency team. This is Platform 7 Control. We have 43 personnel trapped in the main command center. The access lifts are non-functional, and the emergency stairs have been damaged. We can't reach the evacuation points." Sarah studied the platform's structure through her armor's tactical display. The command center was located on the upper levels, approximately 50 meters above ground level. Under normal conditions, evacuation would be handled by emergency lifts or external stairs. But the structural damage had made both options unusable. "I need to get up there," she told Stormclaw. "Can your team handle establishing a perimeter down here?" The Zephyrian nodded. "We'll keep the area secure. But how are you planning to reach the command center?" Sarah activated her armor's auxiliary systems, extending a series of mechanical appendages that transformed the powered suit into something resembling a mechanical spider. The climbing system was experimental technology that few beings outside Earth's special operations community had ever seen. "Human engineering tends to be creative," she said simply. The ascent was a nightmare of wind, rain, and unstable handholds. The platform's exterior was slick, with condensed moisture and industrial lubricants, making each step a calculated risk. Sarah's armor compensated for the conditions as much as possible, but there were limits to what technology could accomplish. Halfway up the structure, one of the main support beams gave way with a sound like breaking thunder. The entire platform lurched to one side, nearly throwing Sarah from her precarious position. She managed to grab an emergency maintenance rail and held on as debris rained down around her. "Platform status critical," Tharn's voice warned. "You have maybe 3 minutes before total collapse." Sarah accelerated her climb, abandoning caution in favor of speed. The command center's emergency access hatch was designed to be opened from the inside, but her armor's cutting tools made short work of the locking mechanism. Inside, she found chaos. 43 beings from a dozen different species were crowded into a space designed for maybe 20. The air recycling systems had failed, leaving them breathing a thin atmosphere that wouldn't support life much longer. "Everyone stay calm," Sarah announced, her voice cutting through the panicked chatter. "We're getting you out of here, but I need you to follow my instructions exactly." The Platform 7 supervisor, a Centaurian named Klex 9, approached her with obvious relief. "Thank the stars. We thought no one could reach us in time." Sarah was already assessing the evacuation options. The command center had multiple windows, but they were reinforced against the planet's hostile environment and would take too long to break through. The main entrance was blocked by debris from the structural collapse, but there was a third option that most beings would never consider. "I need everyone to gather in the center of the room," she ordered. "Stay close together and prepare for emergency transport." "What kind of transport?" Klex 9 asked nervously. Sarah activated her armor's emergency beacon and opened a direct channel to Tharn. "I need emergency transport at Platform 7, Command Center level. Prepare for unusual extraction method." "What are you planning?" the security chief asked. "Something that would probably violate a dozen safety regulations under normal circumstances." Sarah moved to the center of the group and activated her armor's shield generators. The energy field expanded to create a protective bubble around the entire group, strong enough to deflect debris and atmospheric pressure changes. "Everyone hold on to each other," she ordered. "This is going to be rough." She triggered the armor's emergency ejection system, a last resort escape mechanism designed for situations where normal evacuation wasn't possible. Explosive charges blew out the command center's reinforced floor, creating an opening directly above the tunnel system below. For a terrifying moment, they were in free fall through 40 meters of empty space, protected only by Sarah's energy shields and their faith in human engineering. The armor's inertial dampeners absorbed most of the impact when they hit the tunnel floor. but it was still a bone-jarring landing that left several of the evacuees stunned. Above them, Platform 7 collapsed with a roar that shook the entire underground tunnel system. Tons of twisted metal and industrial equipment crashed into the mining pit, sending up a column of smoke and debris that was visible even through the storm. "Everyone accounted for?" Sarah asked, helping the shaken survivors to their feet. Klex 9 performed a quick head count. All 43 personnel present and accounted for. "Minor injuries only." Sarah nodded and activated her communication link. "Tharn, this is Rescue Team Alpha. Package delivered. All personnel safely evacuated." The security chief's relief was evident in his voice. "Outstanding work. Emergency medical teams are standing by at tunnel exit Alpha 7. As they made their way back through the tunnel system, Stormclaw fell into step beside Sarah. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "We misjudged humans." Badly. Sarah removed her helmet, revealing a face that was tired but satisfied. "Your mistake was believing that peaceful means weak. Earth might look like a garden paradise, but it's still the planet that produced us." "What do you mean?" Sarah smiled, thinking of her homeworld's hidden dangers. "Earth has hurricanes that can level cities, earthquakes that split continents, and volcanoes that can change global weather patterns. It has predators in every environment, from the deep ocean to the highest mountains. And somewhere in all that chaos, human beings not only survived, but learned to thrive." Stormclaw's eyes widened as he began to understand. "You're saying that Earth's beauty hides its danger. I'm saying that any species that could turn a death world into a garden paradise probably learned a few useful skills along the way." The evacuation had taken less than an hour from start to finish. But word of the successful rescue spread through the colony faster than the emergency communication system. By the time Sarah and her team reached the medical bay, a crowd had gathered to see the human who had single-handedly saved 43 lives. Administrator Vex Ka was waiting for them, her forearms moving in patterns that the translation device rendered as formal gratitude. Security Specialist Chen, your actions today were exemplary. The Galactic Mining Consortium will be recommending you for commendation." Sarah nodded politely, but her attention was already focused on the next problem. "Administrator, Security Chief Tharn mentioned that the colony has been experiencing sabotage incidents. Given what happened today, I think we need to consider the possibility that the platform collapse wasn't accidental." Vex K's arm movements became more agitated. "What evidence do you have?" "The failure pattern was too convenient," Sarah replied. "Multiple structural supports failing simultaneously during a storm severe enough to prevent normal evacuation procedures. That suggests either extremely poor timing or deliberate action." Tharn stepped forward. "She's right. I've been tracking the incidents for months, and there's a pattern emerging. Someone with detailed knowledge of our operations has been targeting critical infrastructure. But who would do such a thing? The planet is uninhabited." Sarah exchanged a glance with Tharn. "Maybe it's not as uninhabited as the initial surveys indicated. Or maybe someone doesn't want the mining operation to succeed." Over the next several days, Sarah found herself taking on an unofficial leadership role in the colony's security operations. Her successful rescue had earned her respect from beings who had previously dismissed humans as irrelevant, and her tactical expertise was increasingly in demand. The sabotage incidents continued, but with Sarah's help, the security teams began to develop countermeasures. She implemented patrol schedules based on military doctrine, established secure communication protocols, and trained the security personnel in advanced threat assessment techniques. More importantly, she began to piece together the pattern behind the attacks. Someone was indeed targeting the colony's operations with surgical precision, hitting exactly the right systems to cause maximum disruption without immediately obvious evidence of sabotage. "It's a professional operation," she explained to Tharn during one of their evening briefings. "Whoever is doing this has detailed knowledge of mining operations and advanced technical skills. This isn't random vandalism." "But why? What's the motive?" Sarah studied the tactical display, looking for connections that might not be obvious. "That depends on who's behind it. Could be environmental activists who oppose the mining operation. Could be a competing corporation trying to drive up costs. Could even be a government action if someone wants to destabilize the colony. Or it could be the original inhabitants fighting to reclaim their territory, Tharn suggested. It was a possibility that Sarah had been considering but hoping to avoid. If the planet did have an indigenous population that the initial surveys had missed, the situation became much more complicated from both tactical and ethical standpoints. 3 weeks after the Platform 7 incident, they got their answer. The attack came at dawn, when the night shift was ending and the day shift was just beginning their duties. It was perfectly timed to catch the colony during its most vulnerable period, when personnel were transitioning between assignments and communication protocols were at their most chaotic. Sarah was in the security center reviewing overnight reports when the first explosion shook the main administrative building. Emergency alarms began sounding immediately, but she was already moving toward the armory before the automated warnings finished their first announcement. All security personnel to emergency stations, she announced over the colony-wide communication system. This is not a drill. The colony is under attack. Through the center's windows, she could see figures moving between the buildings with the coordination of a trained military unit. They were humanoid but clearly not human, with elongated limbs and adaptive camouflage that made them difficult to track visually. Unknown attackers, she reported to Tharn. Estimated 20 to 30 individuals, moving in coordinated teams. They know our layout and defensive positions. The security chief's response was immediate. Stormclaw's team is pinned down in Section B. Can you reach them? Sarah was already suiting up in her powered armor. On my way. The battle for Theta 7 had begun, and it would test everything that Sarah had learned about combat, leadership, and the true meaning of strength under fire. As she moved through the colony's corridors, engaging attackers with precision that came from years of similar operations, Sarah realized that her assignment to this remote mining colony hadn't been the career detour she had thought it was. It had been preparation for exactly this kind of situation. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone threatened people under the protection of a human soldier who had survived Earth's unforgiving crucible. And that lesson would be delivered with all the creativity, determination, and absolute refusal to surrender that had made humanity's rise from a single, dangerous planet to galactic citizenship, one of the most remarkable stories in known history. The attackers had chosen the wrong colony to target, and they were about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous humans were the ones who looked like they were just trying to live peaceful lives.